Good day and welcome to the class. This is Public Personnel Management as part of the Masters in Public Administration program, and I'm your teacher for this term, Dr. Linda Kiltz. And each week I'll try to provide a very short PowerPoint lecture video about the key themes for the week. But I just wanted to highlight that we are using the 2020 version of the textbook by Bowman that I hope you have, because most of the readings will be for the course will be coming from that textbook. And I'll be talking about the readings from that 2020 textbook for this week. What I really appreciate about our readings is the fact that it really highlights the criticality of personnel management and human resources in the government sector, and how critical a job it is as a leader or manager in managing human resources, and how critical it is to have organizations that run effectively and efficiently, particularly in a time in which the public has a great distrust of the government, especially at the federal level, and there's greater and greater emphasis in doing more with less money. So using our human resource assets effectively and efficiently while safeguarding their rights in the workplace is really, really critical. So I just wanted to highlight some of the elements for this week. First of all, some of the challenges of getting and managing the right people is really challenging to many of the folks that work in the public sector. First of all, the authors highlight the changing workforce that we are dealing with. What we're finding is that the workforce in the government sector is getting both grayer and younger, meaning that many baby boomers are retiring, and as a result, you have a brain drain in which many of our seasoned leaders throughout the government sector at the state, local, and federal level are leaving with that technical expertise, and younger employees have to be hired to replace them. And that can be difficult to find the right people with the right talent. In addition, we're finding that the younger workforce has a little bit different value system than our previous older generations that we've seen in the baby boom generation. For example, Gen Xers and new millennials are individuals who have perhaps less loyalty to organizations because they saw many times their parents being downsized in the private sector, even in the public sector. So they tend to change careers pretty frequently. Very rarely do you get the person nowadays who stays in the same job for 20 years. And they usually demonstrate less loyalty to organizations in that they will change more frequently and go to the better job that will better balance their professional goals and their personal goals. In addition, these younger employees tend to be very independent, very comfortable with new technologies, and they really seek a balance in their work and personal lives that they're not necessarily willing to dedicate 80-hour work weeks. And they really want that balance. And we're also seeing many more women and minorities coming in and serving in the public sector. In addition, there's a growing declining confidence in the government, particularly within the federal government. In fact, in 2017, only 2 out of 10 people claimed to have trust in the federal government most of the time, which is really, really sad. But that has continued to happen since the 1960s. Another major challenge for leaders are declining budgets. For the most part, we've obviously have seen this at the federal level, where we've actually seen a shutdown in government because budget allocations have not been approved. This has been leading to increased use of alternative work arrangements where we actually have fewer full-time employees in many organizations and more of a contingent and part-time workforce. We're also seeing at the federal level a lot of downsizing. Even though the national population has actually increased, the federal government has actually decreased in size, where much more of the work that the federal government is doing is privatized and contracted out. So the number of full-time employees is actually decreasing. However, at the state and local levels, as the population has increased, we have seen an increase in government sector positions at the state and local levels. In addition, we kind of are living in a time of austerity in which that we're having fewer and fewer resources provided to the government sector, but at the same time, demands for greater efficiency and productivity. So there's a demand for getting the most out of each employee in terms of their productivity and perhaps even using data and technology better to be a more productive and efficient organization. In addition, you are also seeing many more emerging virtual workplaces and alternative work arrangements in which obviously in the online environment, I work with individuals from all over the world, 100% online, and I've been working out of my home in Montana for almost 8 years and have had full-time work in many different places and again, worked out of my home. And so more and more the government sector allows for these workplaces where people can work out of their home in a virtual environment. And then the other thing that I thought was great that we are seeing is more of a decentralization and increased managerial flexibility, particularly around the hiring and firing of employees, the training of employees, this idea that give first line supervisors and empower them and give them the flexibility to work with their own teams and their own organization to allow the greatest efficiencies and operational efficiencies and effectiveness. So those are some of the key trends to get the best possible people. Some of the definitions that were highlighted in the textbook in chapter one in particularly were important. Um, this concept of personnel administration really is about the internal processes or the technical approach to numerous functions around personnel management or administration. And this includes things like staffing, position management, getting the proper pay scale, getting job descriptions, having the proper pay systems, benefit systems, training. Those are all parts of personnel administration. When we talk about human resource management, this is the more contemporary, more broader term that's used that really is talking about how we optimize the effectiveness of the technical operations and we actively seek to recruit and select the best employees. So it's more of a focus not just on staffing positions, but really actively seeking the most talented and best employees in terms of talent management. There's also a lot more focus on job design and designing positions and jobs to fit individual skills and needs, but also the needs of the organization, and to also look at evaluations, cost-effective benefits, and overall performance evaluations of both teams and individuals. So human resource management has a much broader umbrella than personnel administration. And the last term is strategic human resource management, in which you are talking about a much larger focus, which it provides a strategic framework to support long-term business goals and outcomes. In fact, there are some macro concerns about the structure, quality, culture, values, and things like that within the organization that strategic human resource management focuses on. Some of the things that was also highlighted was some concepts from the book that Paul Light published in 1997 called The Tides of Reform. And there are some major philosophies that he highlighted in this book that have a direct impact on human resource management. Among them was this concept of scientific management, or also referred to as Taylorism, uh, which was also very important. When you talk about scientific management, the focus is on hierarchy or the micro division of labor, the specialization of labor, as well as a well-defined chain of command. This is philosophy, like I said, is usually associated with Frederick Taylor and is particularly manifest in the bureaucratic organizational form where you have a hierarchical organizational structure with clear leaders, clear chain of command, with a clear emphasis on structure, rules, and perhaps even a one best way of doing something. In fact, there's some scientific principles that are associated with administration, that are associated with Taylorism, that include planning, organizing, staffing, directing, coordinating, reporting, and budgeting. So this is a scientific management approach. And it has implications in human resource management because it emphasizes this idea of conformity and predictability of employees' contributions to the organization. It kind of sees employees kind of like as cogs in a machine, and it sees human relationships as subject to management control. There's a lot of emphasis on productivity measurement, financial incentives, efficiency, and this idea of measuring using lots of data analytics to ensure that people are operating effectively and efficiently. The other model or philosophy that is focused on is this concept of the war on waste. This philosophy emphasizes economy uh, at the most. It looks at having auditors, investigators, and inspectors to pursue this goal of eliminating waste at every level and in every area. And you see this a great deal in human resource management where you have audits, whether they're financial audits on how people are paid. It could be audits around how benefits are balanced and insurance benefits are paid out. You could have critical reports about any type of investigations, such as EEOC investigations. There's things about whistleblowing that is focused in on as well to look at lax rules. And especially around nowadays when you have sexual harassment going on, this idea of war on waste is not only looking at how we're using funds to hire and we're operating our business overall, but effectively managing the rules and upholding the rules and regulations set forth. Um, as a result of this preoccupation with waste, you tend to see in human resource management more internal controls, more HR policies and procedures, more oversight and regulations, including perhaps even the HR department demanding that there be a HR specialist on every hiring board and being integrated into that, more managerial directives, and very tight supervision. So this idea that there's a lot of rules and a lot of oversight. It has to do with part of this philosophy of the war on waste. Another major philosophy that's recommended or looked at by Paul Light is this watchful eye notion, which emphasizes fairness through openness, transparency, and access. Oftentimes, the people highlighted in these are people like whistleblowers, the news media, interest groups. Sometimes unions can play a role as well, and their job is oftentimes to protect the individual and their individual rights through making people aware that maybe the system within the government HR processes aren't fair, whether you're talking about unfair hiring practices, termination processes, unfair treatment of people because of race, sex, ethnicity, etc. So this idea of the watchful eye becomes a very important philosophy as well. This can be identified in lots of different types of legislation directed at human resources and how we hire, how we promote in labor relations, and a host of other things to ensure fairness in hiring processes and the fairness of treatment of people, particularly in promotional processes as well. And then finally, this idea of liberation management is the final tide of reform. The goal is higher performance in government, and particularly Vice President Al Gore in the 1990s had a movement called the National Performance Management System that really looked at getting the most out of each and every individual through organizational reforms and various types of incentive programs. Liberation management's implication for human resources is really towards employee empowerment, re-engineering work teams, continuous improvement, customer service. You might have seen more flattened hierarchies and more flattened organizations with the pullout of mid-level managers, for example, and executives, more self-directed employees, and perhaps more network type of organizations as well. This decentralization of personnel management expands authority and discretion to really line agencies and gives managers much more freedom to achieve results through how they manage and lead their people. So I think liberation management, again, has a very different philosophy and impact on human resource managers that we need to consider. But some of the other items that were talked about in chapter one, particularly of the book, were some of the key principles around human resource management that I thought were important that we also need to consider. That we need to understand the values inherent in career public service, meaning that as public service employees, we always need to have an ethos of public service and that our number one job is to serve the public. And as such, we need to hire the very best employees that also have that ethos of public service. We also need to understand that in the government sector, we also need to integrate many non-civil service systems. For example, the nonprofit and business sector have multiple systems that they use that we can learn from, but we also can integrate within our own systems to become more effective and efficient. In addition, we can understand that the public has rights beyond merit principles, meaning that there's a paradox where our employees work within a democratic governance system where everybody is guaranteed, for example, the right to free speech, yet you don't necessarily have free speech in the workplace. So we have to balance those elements. And then we also have to continually provide leadership for the workforce. In human resources management, one element of leadership is managing our human resource assets. But those are some of the key principles. And if you have any questions, please let me know. And I hope you enjoyed those readings. And I look forward to talking to you in the discussion board. Thank you.